How y'all doing? I appreciate everyone for following this link and coming to the GoFundMe for Carl here. He's a good friend of mine. We met here at a local bar. I was managing. He came through, started chopping it up. He told me his life story, the introductions, how it went. He's been to like 37 different countries. He's a teacher. He's a great dude, phenomenal man. So I'm gonna let y'all get a little introduction to Carl. He's gonna talk a little bit. I got some questions, and yeah, let's get to it.
Hey fam, what's up? My name is Carl. As Josiah said, we met here in New Mexico. But I'm originally born and raised in New York City to Haitian immigrants. So I'm a first generation American, oldest child. And so I basically, until college, stayed in New York City. And then I had a study abroad program opportunity, which I took and traveled to Kenya. I lived just outside of Nairobi for a year back in 1986, 87, which is like light years away in terms of technology and ease of travel and just information, all of that. Things have changed so much. It's much easier now. Got two younger sisters. I'm single, unmarried. What else? Never really knew what I wanted to do, but I studied political science in college, and pretty much have had the opportunities come to me and taken advantage of opportunities that I've paid attention to over the years. It's created a bit of a mosaic, pretty eclectic mosaic in terms of jobs and experiences and
people you met, just like traveling in different countries.
Yeah. I mean, I fell into some really, a lot of different stuff. I went back to Kenya 10 years after I left there as an employee of the White House for the Clintons. Mrs. Clinton went there.
He's official, man. He's official.
So that's just one like kind of branch that links back to the travel tree. As Josiah might have intimated, I'm an ESL teacher I have been an ESL teacher, English as a second language teacher in Vietnam. I was there for 6 years. Prior to that, I spent 10 years teaching in Ukraine, Eastern Europe. Yes, the same Ukraine that's going through this terrible situation with Russia. I got here at the end of November. I think Josiah and I met in December, and as he said, we've been chopping it up ever since. We're a couple of generations between us. I think I'm maybe his parents' age, but I found the secret to feeling young and staying young is to meet and engender friendships with younger people.
Yeah, and it's been good, man. It's been good. He's dropped a lot of knowledge on me. Dropped a lot of knowledge on me. I mean, he's always giving me kind words every time he came through. He would usually get off of work because he worked right across the street, so we'd always just, chop it up, have a beer, usually the last one's in there, so I'd be cleaning up, he'd just be dropping gems, and, that's kind of how it worked. But we're going to get into some questions now. Got about like 10 of them, so it should be pretty quick. First question here. How was your first experience out of the country as a child, and then, as an adult, because your parents are from Haiti, so how was that? Was things out of the norm, any culture shocks that were different for you?
We went to Haiti when I was like 5 years old. I remember that. That was a culture shock in and of itself, just because I had never seen poverty like that before.
Right.
Unfortunately, Haiti still is, and has been for a long time, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and I saw it when we went. Not on the very first trip, but a few trips later, I remember the scene at the airport with these people begging, and they wouldn't even let us let the car move. And my mom had a bag of pennies that she brought. I didn't know about it. She just gave me the pennies, and this one guy just ripped them all out of my hands and cut my finger with his long nail.
That's crazy.
So that was like, whoa, because when in America we were like middle class. And my mom was a nurse, my dad worked in an accounting firm, but I had never seen poor people on the street, poor people. So that was, and plus the language, because I don't speak Haitian Creole very well. I I understand it, but for some reason, I always spoke in English to my parents. Even when they spoke to me in Creole, I would speak to them in English. So I don't have like the fluency.
Right.
So, and just how fast everybody speaks there. You know, it's just like you know, and sometimes it's the first time experiencing when you think two people are having a fight, just because they're just
very energetic in their conversation.
Yeah. And I understood my mom much better when I saw, you know, her in her context at home.
Right.
You know, when she was completely herself and felt comfortable at home. So it was culture shock with the, you know, the little shock at the airport, but then it was also a good thing, just because you really, as an immigrant, you don't really know your parents until you see them in their home country, because that's when they can exhale.
Right.
You know?
They feel a little more comfortable somewhere.
A lot more comfortable. My mother, even though she got naturalized as an American, she always was proud to be Haitian.
Right.
You know, and that's always
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So, as you know, we already talked about, you know, you've been out of the country, 37 different countries. You've had a lot of jobs, obviously, in those different countries where you stayed at to live, you know, support yourself. So, what were some of the jobs that you worked outside of the country that wasn't teaching that you know, enjoyed, that you learned a lot from? You know?
Well, I had an opportunity to travel to Ukraine. That was the reason why I went to Ukraine in the first place. On the national election that they had in 2004, 2005. No, it was 2005. And so I went there, and so it was like we were being paid to be there. So I wasn't on vacation. Because most of my travel has been work related.
Right.
Which has been a blessing, you know. Because if I had been to vacation in 37 countries, I'd have to be a baller.
Yeah.
So I got a chance to go with a big team of other Americans who were, because I had done election campaigning for the Clintons and Al Gore and John Kerry, and so, you know, they wanted some American style campaign effort there in Ukraine, which didn't always fit, because they have their own style of doing things. They're not necessarily like democracy there. They're working towards it, and this was back when the real gangsters and oligarchs were in charge and trying to stay in charge. So I was there for 3 months, and it was winter. So it was January, February, March, when the election was in early April. And so we did the work, we got paid well, traveled around the country, and we saw a lot of places, a lot of different things that I'd never seen before, like exterior buildings, their exterior buildings. They have this pattern of painting them in pastel colors. I know it sounds like a weird thing, but I've never seen like light peach and light green colored buildings, you know. Yeah, like, you know, it was like part of their aesthetic, exactly. Every town had a statue of Lenin, and every town had a war memorial too, because, you know, evidently during World War II, the Soviet Union lost about 27 million people. We talk about 500,000, which is a lot,
right.
But Soviet Union lost 27 million, including civilians. That was a big thing, and they, you know, so every town has a war memorial, because everybody was involved. All the men were involved, and the women were in the factories working hard. So that was my first like real gig, like an actual working opportunity. And then I returned to Ukraine after my dad passed, and then I met up with an American at a bar. I don't know why bars are like magnets for people, but and he worked for a PR agency, and because of my experience in DC, he was like, "Oh my goodness, we have so much to talk about." So he gave me this gig, and it didn't really work for me, because it was only like 10 people I communicated with all day, and I didn't speak the language, Russian, because they speak Russian mainly in Kiev. So I was bottled up in an office, and, you know, office politics. Yeah, it didn't. And I didn't know what was exactly. I couldn't pinpoint it. So I was hanging out with these this brother and sister pair. They were from Nigeria, but whose mom was Ukrainian, because their dad when he went to university, he came to Ukraine to study aviation, which was a big thing back in the 60s. I didn't know about until I went there. So there are these half black, half white kids, and they're like both Nigerian, and they speak Russian and Ukrainian fluently, and they embrace their Ukrainian grandparents there. It was beautiful to watch, actually.
That's crazy.
They gave me my initial home when I came back to Ukraine. They let me stay with them until they actually helped me find my first apartment. And one of their friends came over one day after work, and we were chopping it up. And he was like, "Carl, why don't you consider teaching English?" I was like, "Well, I never taught English." At the time, I hadn't thought about the experience I had with my mom earlier.
Right.
But I was trained. They're like, "Man, they just need expats, which are expatriates, people who live, foreigners who live overseas, are called expats." And apparently, this was a situation where a native speaker doesn't have to have a degree or anything, can teach. They start you off by teaching conversation club, which when I did, I took his advice. I went, and the guy who owned the school, his Ukrainian wife, was really cool and laid back, and he gave me a chance to do the conversation club, and I had like 30 students, and I found my happy place, a sweet spot.
Yeah.
And I was like, started teaching them English. So there's a lot of language centers in Ukraine, also in Vietnam, where people self-pay in order to improve their English skills. And Ukrainians are a little less willing to learn, in terms of now they are. But back then it was, pulling teeth. So, but you still had forward-thinking people knowing that they needed English.
Right.
And they wanted to learn English. So I did that, and I, worked at that school for a while. I quickly learned that being a teacher allowed you an entry into people's lives, because they want you. Good students will want to share your culture and expose you to their culture, and that's how I spent. That's how I developed a safety net of people. Because I always made sure my adult students knew that when I had health problems, when I had, when I invited them to, I actually held a conversation club in my apartment, and that was great too. Once a week, 6-7 students would come to my house. I would cook for them, actually, surprise them with some food. So it was, I try to make myself vulnerable so I could be accepted, because Ukrainians, and Russians, they don't make lifelong friends after university. So it's not like us where we could meet, even though we have a big age difference, we could chop it up like that.
Yeah.
That doesn't really happen back there. But as a teacher, you have a door that you can walk through. You kind of have to force yourself on people, but not in a toxic way, but in a way that's like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? I'm free, and they're like, oh, my cousin's having a party, or we're going fishing. I don't fish, I don't like fishing, but I went fishing with them because, there's a chance to hang out.
Yourself, yeah. Be more relatable for sure. So, that brought you to your world of teaching. You've been teaching English mainly, so I wanted to know two questions kind of paired together. If you could teach another subject besides English, what would you want to teach? And if you could teach in a different country besides Ukraine or Vietnam, what country would you pick?
Good questions. Right off the bat, geography. I use maps in my classroom because they're visual aids, and especially students from Vietnam and Ukraine. Everybody has a story about where their grandfather's from, and they moved here. The parents went to university here. So
stories.
Yeah, so they have an opportunity to. Also, I want to train them to be able to recognize their country on a map. So I use a world map, I use a Vietnamese map, I use a Ukrainian map, just so people can kind of have this visual something to point to.
Right.
So geography, I would teach geography, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, that or drama.
Gotcha. What other country would you want to teach in? That you haven't taught in already?
Haiti.
Okay.
Because I have a weak spot for going back and helping my mom's people. My people. They are my people. I'm of a Haitian blood. So, and because they're in such destitute times that it's like, I know, we have an expression in Creole, "Mete men," means put your hands in. It means everybody participate. Everybody needs to help. There, I'd like to, I'll admit this. I've thought about countries where I'd like to live beyond the 2-week or 1-month travel experience. Spain is another fascinating place, / Portugal. Africa would be great to try. In Hong Kong, because it also has an interesting history, and it's infrastructure a little more advanced, and they've got a lot of good hiking there. So I like being outdoors and hiking and stuff. So.
Well, speaking of hiking and outdoors, what was your favorite place to like hang out outside of the country?
In Vietnam, I found an amazing space just outside this town that was up in the mountains, like a mile high. It's called Da Lat, and it's a town of 300,000 people. Up until recently, never had a stoplight. Yeah, yeah, because the inclines and stuff. But you know, a lot of people travel there. It's a tourist destination for Vietnamese.
Gotcha.
So that's what I like. Like when I go to Chinese restaurants, I want to see what the Chinese people eat. And when I'm in places like Vietnam and Ukraine, I want to see experience the places that I'm curious about, places that like those people domestically travel to. Like people come from Hanoi or Saigon and they go to Da Lat. Why? Because it's up in the mountains, it's cold, and a lot of places in Vietnam are hot because it's tropical, it's in the equator. People have to buy coats and sweaters and hats, and people with their kids, they love it. They come there to be chilly, you know? Yeah, so I spent
a different environment.
It was the first place I ever traveled, took my own kind of personal road trip. I took a bus from Saigon to Da Lat, and this was before, fast forward, I lived there for 2 years. But the first year I was there, I went there, and I went because I wanted to climb this mountain called Lang Biang. And fast forward to, you know, I had an opportunity to live and work there. So we moved our company from Saigon to Da Lat. I worked for a Canadian guy who built obstacle course races and other outdoor events. And so I took a 3-year break from teaching in Vietnam and did that. And this place, Lang Biang Mountain, I've been to 30 plus times because it's awesome.
Oh, so that's for sure favorite place.
Yeah. It's tough. It's rough sledding, especially the last part of the hike. But when you get there, you take a photo with the sign. It says you're up 2,167 meters, and you know you can't fake that. So you know.
Yeah, for sure. You go for it or not. Yeah.
And depending on the weather, you know. It might be completely overcast, or you might be able to see for miles because you're really up that high. So that was my favorite. That's my favorite place. Like in fact, when I go back, I'm gonna go hang out and see my friends in Saigon, and ideally go to Da Lat just to be able to go there. You know, pine forest up in the mountains. It's like I can't wait to get back.
That's dope. So I mean, it's like you said, you've been to other different places, and you said like when you're in Ukraine, you want to see what the Ukrainians eat. You know, in Vietnam, you want to see what those people eat. So I'm assuming you ate a lot of food there in the different countries you were at. So what were the top 3 dishes maybe out of the places you've been at outside of the country?
Okay, so I got turned out when I went to Senegal. I did a trip with Mrs. Clinton, went to Senegal. And Senegal is a formerly French-occupied country in West Africa. So there's a connection because of Haiti is a French-speaking country, also colonized by the French. And so there's a lot of linguistics and attitudinal stuff that's the same, similar to Haitians. But the Senegalese, they tear it up in the kitchen. They have, I got so turned out that when I came back I was hunting Senegalese restaurants. They have jollof rice, which is this orange flavored rice, orange colored rice. They have jibber jam, and then mafe, which is a beef with peanut sauce. They fry fish. It's at the coast, so food in Senegal is off the chain. Now in Kenya, I spent a year in Kenya, and the British occupied England, and if you go through the history, other than India, the Kenyans, they don't have cuisine, but they do have a lot of Indians in that. So I got introduced to Indian food of all places in Kenya. That's why I got my first in-depth experience with Indian food, because there's a lot of East Indians in Kenya. They were born over there to help build the railway system there, and then they stayed there as merchants. So there's generations of Indians. Yeah. So Senegal for sure. Let's see, Morocco. Yeah, because the way they present the food in Morocco, it comes tagine. It's a dish with couscous and all this like lamb meat and stew, and it's like covered in this like very architectural device. So they present it like that.
Right. Presentations.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Cuban food. I've never been to Cuba. There's actually a Mexican restaurant in Vietnam that I'm friends with the owner, so I've had some Mexican food in Vietnam.
That's interesting.
There's
I never would have thought of Mexican stuff.
There's a Vietnamese couple in Nha Trang, which is the last place I lived at the coast in Vietnam, who speak fluent Russian and cook Russian food. And Russians go there to eat because their food is authentic. Like borscht, it's like national like beet soup that the Russians and Ukrainians eat. I go there for it, and it's a big bowl, and it's just like it was. It's even better than what I had in Ukraine.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's the world is it's a big world, but it's a small place.
Yeah.
A big planet, small world.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
And when you can connect with someone based on like when the connection point for me and this Vietnamese woman was the fact that we both could speak. I mean, I speak much less Russian than she does, but the fact that I can speak to her, greet her in Russian, order in Russian in her Vietnamese hometown, it was just like surreal. You know?
That's dope, man. That's dope. All right, so next question we got here. What was the first thing that you ate moving back to the States that you were kind of like craving after you were outside the country for so long?
So I came back after 8 years for my mom's funeral, and I had Haitian food right away. We went to a Haitian restaurant from the airport because I miss I can cook some Haitian dishes, but I wanted to get Haitian food.
You wanted to hit Haitian food.
Like 2 dishes. I was like, This time coming back from Vietnam, I flew through San Francisco and I spent 10 days there with a buddy, the guy who owns this house, and In-N-Out was the first stop. My request was In-N-Out.
Okay. So when you go back, what's the first thing you ready to dive into when you go back?
It's a dish called Bún Chả Hanoi. It's a dish that President President Obama had when he was in Hanoi. Hanoi is the capital of Vietnam. It's in the north. Okay. It's like their Washington D.C. Right. Saigon is their New York.
Okay.
So, but they make that dish. Northerners live in the southern part of Vietnam.
Yeah, they know that.
Yeah, so so I seek out Bún Chả. It's got this. They've got these grilled like bacon and grilled pork cutlets and with noodles, vermicelli noodles. And Vietnamese are famous for throwing greens into everything. I never experienced greens in my soup before, which is really. But I got accustomed to it. But it's chopsticks and a spoon, and chilies on the table. And, a couple of fried rice places that I know of, like where the cats cook on the street, and it's like 50 cents for like a big plate. But they only do takeout, so you gotta go at a certain time, and they run out of food eventually. So
they run out.
Yeah, but I love watching them. I love watching people work, physically work. I mean, not like I'm watching you do I'm your slave master, but because I like watching people. Because when the people are, and it's young kids who are focused on, because to do a job well, you have to focus, and ideally use 2 hands. So I'm in awe of people. I'm always fascinated by how people do, how they carry themselves at work. What's their routine? Because everyone has a routine. Even if it seems effortless, there's an art. I say there's an art and science to almost everything.
Right.
Sometimes there's more art needed than science, and sometimes there's more science needed. But I try to combine the artist and the scientist in my approach to life. So that would be Bún Chả. But I also have a buddy that we had Thanksgiving at his restaurant. He's an American from Arizona, and he has gone back, and he has a Tex-Mex restaurant called Tippy's. So Tippy's, I'm gonna go straight to Tippy's, have some, I've been having Tex-Mex here, but I just need to see him and just hang out with him and get filled up with our past friendship, because we're not that close, but we experienced a great Thanksgiving together at his restaurant years ago, When you're an expat and Thanksgiving is nothing to anyone else there,
Right.
anywhere in the world. I used to take the opportunity to introduce Thanksgiving, and once I actually cooked a meal and brought it for my
They
students.
understood it. Yeah.
Yeah, just because I needed them to understand me more, So.
Just an off-topic question. What are the other holidays in other countries? Like, since you brought up Thanksgiving, what's one major holiday that they share in the Ukraine and most likely?
That's a good question.
Share in Vietnam?
So they have a different calendar. They go by the Gregorian calendar. So they celebrate Christmas. It's a really good question. They celebrate Christmas after New Year's.
What? Okay.
And for Ukrainians and Russians, New Year's is like
That's the day.
that's the day. That's the day.
Okay.
Christmas is like January 7th.
Right.
But New Year's and they have this tradition because during the Soviet Union they had 13 republics, and Georgia is one of them, and Armenia, and they get like their citrus fruits because they're south near, down south of Ukraine, and they have more warmer weather, and so they grow dates there and oranges, and they would make sure, and this was in family to a family, oranges are the symbol of Christmas there. Because during the Soviet Union, families had oranges was like a sign of the coming of spring, and it's just that thing that was special for that holiday.
Crazy.
It is. I know for us it's turkey for Thanksgiving. They also do this 12 dishes thing on Easter, I believe it is. So there's 12 dishes on the table to represent the 12 apostles.
Okay.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the holidays there. They have a holiday in July called Ivana Kupala, which is a fertility festival, and women wear this wreath of flowers around their head like a crown. They jump over fire. So they still have a lot of paganism in there. Like the Haitians still, they do voodoo, not like the black magic voodoo, but what came from West Africa and what has been, bastardized and blacklisted. Voodoo has some powerful stuff going on, but the Ukrainians also have a pagan aspect to there because they're an ancient people, man. They were around for, way before we were around. I mean, they were the backstop for when the Mongols were headed to Europe. They had to be defeated. Ukraine was the stop line.
Right.
Yeah. So they have what else? Easter is really interesting because they have a greeting, Christos Voskres, Vaistos Voskres, which is God has risen, God is great, God is risen. Okay. So they greet each other with that on Easter. Like before saying what's up, they'll be like Christos Voskres, Vaistos Voskres. And I really got into I'm a good mimic, so I didn't speak the language fluently, but I could say I like to shop, I can cook. Yeah. So I have to be able to say the names of food and the number, and food names and the number of pounds or kilos or money. So I always confuse people because they were like, wow, you speak Russian, you speak very well. I'm like, no, I just do
the accent down.
Yeah, that's it. I'm a good mimic.
Word, man, that's dope. So we about to wrap it up. We'll key with this last question here. This whole thing is to return back to Vietnam, get you back teaching again. So other than that, what's the goal? What's the mission? What's the vision for when you return to Vietnam? Are you making any pit stops? How's it going down as soon as you get the plane ticket and you're leaving the States?
So I have two options: flying west through LA to Saigon, or going to New York, then going to Portugal, and then traveling across Europe and Asia to Vietnam. So I have two Ukrainian friends that live in those places. So I have a buddy that I know from back when he was a rapper in Kiev, and he has since become a U.S. citizen and had a baby with a girl, and he lives in LA. And we saw each other in Vietnam because he came to visit. His younger brother was living in Vietnam when I was there. And that's probably the most realistic. The other guy lives in Portugal, and though I'd really love to see him and his children and just make sure confirm that he's alive, because he was lucky to to be out of the country when the war started, because the men in Ukraine between the ages of 18 and 60 cannot leave that country.
Right.
So he was out of the country, living with his family. So he's safe in Portugal, which is apparently a great, place full of expats. But I'm leaning towards LA. It's cheaper to go that way. I can go see my boy Vova, his daughter, and then from LA to Vietnam. Now, first thing in Vietnam will be to go from the airport straight to my boy Paul's house. Paul is an amazing character. He's originally from Chile, but he grew up in Alaska. He speaks fluent English, fluent Spanish.
Right.
Apparently, more fluent Italian.
Oh dang!
And speaks fluent Vietnamese. And I've witnessed him in front meetings, because I used to work with him at an outdoor rock climbing gym, where Vietnamese people who didn't know that he spoke in Vietnamese.
They were shocked.
They were shocked because he was making jokes and he was they were like, what? Paul, he has a nice big house. He does Airbnbs, and he's always got room for me and a spare motorbike. So that's my buddy. I gotta go see him, give him a big hug, and then I'm gonna go to the bank to make sure all my banking stuff is in order, because that's the one thing
make sure the money is right.
Yeah, because I don't want to make sure my bank account is straight, because sending money home and getting money from home is going to be vital. Especially because this campaign is going to go beyond hopefully my time here. So that's just real, folks. Then it's traveling, getting back to my little house, because what I've done since I knew I was going back, I kept my little house in Nha Trang, which is at the coast, at the beach. And so my landlady was nice enough to support me during COVID. She reduced my rent. And so in turn, I didn't want to liquidate everything and sell it, because I wasn't planning on coming back here for good. So I sent her the rent money every month. So I want to go back, see my house, see my neighbors, see my landlady, because she lives across the street, give her a big hug and say, tell her thank you for taking care of me. Because she reduced the rent and then she kept it reduced while I was away. And I've been paying for the last 8 months, regularly. And then go see if I can go see a few friends of mine in Dalat. But the opportunity that is going to be hopefully being presented to me today is to have an opportunity to be a freelance camp guide for an outdoor activity program that's run by a company called Asia Motions. So they take these middle school and high school kids on week-long adventure packages, and so they need a few more freelance event leaders, and hopefully that I'll be able to do that for a little while before hitting the classroom. So be outside in nature.
Because obviously school's not in session right now.
Yeah, they start back in August, but I prefer to go that route, so I'm not
thrown right back into the classroom.
Right. Yeah.
Get familiar with,
and get to be outside, because the last couple of jobs I've had here, I've been inside all day.
Yeah.
So
good, man. Well, shoot, I think that was a good little thing there we got. Hopefully everything's still recording. Got the audio. Anything else you wanna throw out?
I appreciate y'all for listening. Josiah will be a forever friend. Even though we met recently, he'll be a forever friend. I came here to Rio and knew no one, because I was asked to be the caretaker of this house here. And little by little, I've created a small community. Ironically, my first friends and my strongest friends are the ones that I met at the Hopper, which is where he worked, and now I actually work as a pizza maker.
Yeah, crazy. One in, one out.
So yeah, we can't have two of us in one place, because they might think it's a meeting going on.
Yeah. Well, man, I think it was dope. I appreciate you guys once again. Thank you guys.
Anything you can spare, thank you. I appreciate you. It'll go to a very judicious cause. I want to be able to go there, handle my business, and hopefully find an opportunity to add more value than I did before, which I thought was considerable. Hopefully be able to one day open my own language center, find the right partner there, and because I really enjoy being a cultural ambassador, but also helping Vietnamese children speak English properly.
Yeah, start your own center, man. That'd be dope. So thank you guys again. And one last thing. This is going on. He's looking to go back in the fall. So that's how long this campaign's kind of going on. I feel like that might be a question somebody might ask, is how long is this up and running till? So he's trying to go back in the fall, October-ish, somewhere around there. So that's how long this is going to be going on. So please, please, please donate up until then. You'll be seeing me post links. We'll have some updates. I'm going to get some photos he just shared with me from when he was in the classroom teaching, a bunch of other spots where he was out hiking, and just some other things so you can kind of see what he was doing out there and what he's going to go back and continue to further up upon once he does get out there. So thank you, Carl. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, man.
It's been dope. And catch you guys on the next one.